waging war on corruption. Why does the United States have 5% of the world's population out of 100? Out of 100%, we've got 5%. Why do we have more than half the wealth? Because we had liberty and freedom and private property rights. No one else has had it to the level we have had. We live like barons. We live like kings. Even our poorest citizens live better than the rest of the poor worldwide. And when you lose your Bill of Rights and Constitution, which we're fast doing, most of it's gone. We can still get it back. It's been taken criminally. We can take back what's rightfully ours. As we lose that engine, we now see the highest poverty rate in 50 years in the United States with new government numbers, and that's even using Cook numbers. The feds, it's been shown, on unemployment, on inflation, on every level, manipulate the numbers to show it to be better than it is. Most economists say it's the worst it's been in U.S. history. NAFTA and GATT were designed to deindustrialize us. And finally, Boehner and Limbaugh and all these big Republican leaders are being honest about it. I hear them. And they're saying the government is run by crooks. They want to destroy the economy by design to make you dependent on them and to make you poor so you can't resist. Well, that's actually what the UN says. That's actually what the Biological Diversity Assessment states. That's what the head climatologist for NASA says. Last week, he gave 4 different interviews. The White House science czar, John P. Holdren, we read the quotes on Friday, saying we want a post-industrial U.S. The carbon taxes are to get rid of jobs. I mean, they're not even denying this anymore. And that's my frustration. I was so frustrated this weekend. I talk about this all the time. But I've got new info I'm about to go over this bombshell. Every time I look at my children, who are innocent and smart and good, I get angry now. Because I realize we have a tyranny. Just like if I was Russian and Lenin was taking over, I'd be upset. Or if I was German and Hitler was coming to power, I'd be upset. I mean, I know history. And we don't have to repeat it if people will wake up. And presidents come and go, but these globalist corporate interests have stated what they're doing. They're conquering the planet through socialism. They come in, take over your government, get more than half the public dependent on government, as we've now crossed that Rubicon a year ago. More than half the public are on welfare or get handouts or have a government job or contract. 51% now. And once they've got that dependent group, just like Mao Zedong had half the people on the government dole, they come after the rest of us. And for every government job, it costs 2 free market jobs. Well, you see the government growing, state, local, federal, everything else shrinking. We know what this does. And people got to get it through their heads that it's being done by design. We're being economically conquered. Now, I've been on air since 1995. And in 1995, I had all the documents that we've covered here about the IMF, the World Bank, the Council on Foreign Relations, the UN, the Rand Corporation, all of them saying they want a world government and how they would collectivize things and how NAFTA and GATT was designed to deindustrialize us. The globalists wrote about this in the 60s. How do you think in the 70s they made the movie with James Caan, Rollerball? You watch that movie, they're throwing it in your face. Every country is only allowed to basically produce one thing so that no nation can be independent, and they're all tied together by a global corporate government. This is all publicly stated. If you read Bloomberg Business Week, they tell you this every week. If you read The Economist every week, as I do, they tell you it's happening. Hundreds of articles every week admitting world government. But in almost all of these mainstream articles, they say world government is the answer. Now, think about where we've come from. Old-timers 30, 40, 50 years ago would read these government white papers about how they were incrementally bringing us into a tyrannical, unelected world government, and they would warn people, and they'd get put on government list, and they'd be harassed, and if they got prominent, they'd be demonized. Okay? Now, here we are. It's 2010. 2010 is long in the tooth, and every day, I don't have to read the Financial Times of London or Washington Post telling me how great world government is or how it's the answer to our economic problems, though they're doing that. We've got the IMF openly saying we must have a new global currency and announcing how they want to do it, and it's exactly how I told you they would do it 15 years ago. Not because Alex Jones is special. If I see a Mack truck coming at me and I'm standing in the middle of a highway, I'm going to get out of the way. Here comes a big truck with its lights on, blowing its horn. I'm not a rocket scientist. They said they would do this. That's what's so frustrating about it, okay? And they've got all these yuppie idiots who their comeback is, well, you've seen Star Trek. It's one world government and that. Literally, I get that every day. Or isn't that how humans are growing, is towards world government? No, it's not. Towards an unelected, secretive corporate government that destroys your right to private property and freedom and raises taxes on you to fund them offshore and they're above the law. That, I mean, even if you're for world government and are a big chump, you should know that national sovereignty are firewalls to tyranny. Just like having 50 states is a firewall. One state's got taxes too high, you run to the state with lower taxes. And the OECD and the IMF and World Bank say they want a world government to set global taxes at over 80% like France. That's all the U.S. has got going for it. No industry left to speak of, dumbed down, lowest test scores in the West. But at least we've still got lower taxes as high as they are compared to Europe and Asia. So there's still some jobs and investment coming here. But once they have their global corporate government in place, there's nowhere to run. So the info I'm about to give you is so important. I hope you'll take notes. This story is at prisonplanet.com and prisonplanet.com only. I wrote this in consultation with Paul Watson this morning. We compiled this report. They have come out in the last 2 weeks and have fully detailed that in the next 2 months, they plan to pass global agreements with the private corporations meeting with the UN and the head of our State Department and the head of our Treasury to establish a global currency and global currency regulations, and to establish multiple global taxes, including currency taxes, industry value-added taxes, and more importantly, the regulations that go with that. So you've got 6 megabanks, 6, who fund the environmental movement, who openly fund the carbon taxes to be paid to them. And I've got the quotes here from the heads of the central banks. I'm going to read them. Then I'm going to go to your calls. And they openly state this will give the private banks total government power and financial power over everything. Now, these global banks have already got control of the Bank of England, the private Federal Reserve, and other major central banks of almost every country. But they've still got to back it up with your regional tax money, and still your Congress, your parliaments, your legislatures have some control, though they've phased out and handed most of their control over, being bought off by these offshore interests. Under this system, we will lose all control, just like we have over trade by joining the World Trade Organization, a private group. And so that's what's happening is these global interests come in. They've got the corporate structure. They've got the corporate systems of control. They're coordinated. They've got the organizational skills, and they incrementally take over your governments, have those governments point the tax money at them, and then just always expand more. So, no more denial. The Republicans and Democrats have stalled us for decades, saying there's no world government. We're already deep into it, but now it's coming out in the open. But I want to now get into our top story. And I want to remind listeners, you can go to the IMF website, you can go to the World Bank website, the International Bank of Settlements website, you can go to the CFR Zone website. This is all public, and this was public 30 years ago. This was public 40 years ago. This was public 50 years ago. But the difference is 15, 20 years ago, you had to go to the library, a bigger library, a college library, a major city library to be able to find this, and people wouldn't do it. So the media would get up there on television and tell you it didn't exist. And now the CFR has published reports bragging how they kept it from the public, laughing at you. It's very funny to them. And they've used all their liberal and conservative talk show hosts to laugh at people and say you're an extremist and it didn't exist. The difference is now it's here. They bankrupted us through the end of Glass-Steagall 11 years ago, as we told you they would. Their solution is more taxes, VAT taxes at the national, international level. Now, let's go through this Paul Joseph Watson, Alex Jones report that is at prisonplanet.com right now. And it just went up on InfoWars as well. Let's go to this. Globalists push world transaction tax at UN summit. And then later in the report, it links directly to the IMF, where they're also setting up their new global currency. Now, you'll still have your U.S. currency, your euro currency, your pound, your yen, your yuan, your shekels, but they will all be globally set every day at this private central bank consortium, which will allow them even more insider trading to consolidate power. And every currency trade you make, taxes will be paid to the mega six banks, all public. This is private corporations that will put you out of your house if they have their way. They're ruthless. Let's continue. Final move for world government and destruction of middle class begins. Don't say you weren't warned. Globalists representing 60 nations will meet at the UN this coming week to push a tax on world financial transactions in the name of solving poverty and climate change. Has nothing to do with that. Formerly launched as a massive program to bankrupt the middle class and enrich the coffers of the global government. Spearheaded by European Union countries, the so-called innovative financing proposal envisions a tax of 0.005%. That's how it started in England with the VAT 30 years ago. Now it's 15%, which experts estimate could produce $30 billion a year worldwide for priority causes. As Ira Stoll, editor of Future Capitalism, points out, new taxes always start off small so as not to be resisted by people forced to pay them, like the income tax started at 1% and are then always gradually increased. Now, this was all under the Copenhagen Treaty last year, but they failed, so they're now back again. When people suggest taxes, they always start out small. But once the door is open to the idea of global taxes, with a global army, global rules, you can bet they won't end small. Never mind all the issues about whether development aid actually helps poor countries or just winds up empowering corrupt local dictators and their cronies. Yeah, they're paid off by this. The call for a global transaction tax arrives in the aftermath of the leaked UN blueprint, which outlines how elitists plan to rebrand global warming in an effort to dismantle the middle class. That's their stated goal. They want you under their control. You think they want you with money and uppity? No. They want you poor. And winds up empowering corrupt local dictators and their cronies. It goes on. The aim is to limit and redirect the aspirations for a better life of rising middle classes around the world. In other words, to reduce the standard of living for the middle classes in Western Europe and America. That's a quote from the document. However, as we uncovered during the Copenhagen summit, the program of global redistribution of wealth and transaction taxes largely centers around looting the wealth of the middle class in richer countries and then using that money to bankroll the construction of world government. As the leaked Danish text of the Copenhagen Treaty revealed, the money generated from the consumption tax will go directly to the World Bank, not to developing countries to lower carbon emissions or alleviate poverty. In fact, actually increase taxes on them as well. That's why the third world said no. Under the terms of this proposal, poorer countries will not simply be handed the money pillaged from richer nations. Instead, they will be forced to accept green loans, which actually shut down their industry, in the name of combating climate change, a policy that would land the already financial devastated third world with even more debt payable to globalist institutions such as the IMF. Even if you